One of the reasons we look forward to going to World Cup finals each year is there's absolutely no other race that you're going to see like this. You show up, the track is just being covered by these amazing looking autumn trees. The air is always just crisp, cool. I think we've only had it rain like one day out of the multiple years we've been there. So you've got this beautiful facility, beautiful weather, and then, when the crowds show up for qualifying Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I mean, it is electric. So, this is a race that literally everybody in the shop looks forward to year round. We showed up this year and it was, still an awesome crowd, still the same cool environment, but it was like 80 degrees, which was something we weren't expecting. But luckily with the elevation of Maryland International Raceway, we knew we'd still have some good air to race in. Coming into World Cup Finals 2022, we were bringing a handful of cars that a lot of people are pretty familiar with, and then a couple new cars to make some pretty big changes to. George and Christine Dodworth are going to be bringing their Light Fury and Night Fury combo that we've been campaigning for a couple years now. Everybody pretty much knows those cars. We had some pretty cool changes with Christine's car, but really not so much in George's Night Fury. George had recently acquired Varen's old chassis car that's now been dubbed Night Terror. So that was going to be a car we were going to try and go pretty quick with on a new tire setup that we hadn't tried yet. Then we were also bringing Stacy Barnett's car and Clay Kerr's car. One of the cars we made the biggest changes to was Christine's Light Fury. We'd been running that car competitively in the 68mm classes for a couple years now, but as the class got more competitive and faster and quicker and everything, we started really having to lean on the turbos really hard. We swapped to a 4.3 liter at one point last year, and then we broke turbos at 2 events earlier in 2022. It's frustrating for George, Christine, the shop to go to these races and just have a turbo fail relatively quickly, and it's not something we could keep doing. It's not the product that we want to have out there. So we kind of took a step back and looked at maybe trying some other turbos that we hadn't really considered much for the GTR platform. Precision's been making a 6785 for kind of some Honda specific drag racing classes that we knew would make good power. So we decided to see if we could fit them in the engine bay of the GTR, which was no easy task at all. But we came up with a good plan, got a couple turbos ordered, and got cranking away on the fab project. Come to find out, the 6785 is actually quite a bit more difficult to fit than even the big brother, the 7685. The compressor housing is actually a notable amount larger than the 7685 housing is, which we weren't really expecting. So we ended up having to go in and actually clearance the block, kind of make some custom engine mounts, notch the frame rail some more, which I think is probably the third or fourth frame rail notch that we've done in this car. But we managed to get those in there. Wade did a killer job fabricating everything. The package came out just absolutely insane looking. It looked like something you'd pull out of like some Koenigsegg or something. It was just a huge turbo crammed in, on either side of the engine bay. We got that thing on the dyno. With it still an M5 fuel, it made just over 2,500 horsepower out of a pair of 67. So we knew if these things stayed together, this car was going to be fast. George's Night Terror has been a car that we've had in a few different races, but basically it's been different every time out. As I'm sure anybody can imagine, trying to get a full tube chassis car like that down the track and make changes every event isn't going to result in a reliable car, and that's exactly what we've had so far. George is a super busy guy. We didn't have the time, to have him come out, hit a bunch of testing opportunities. So we kind of just put together a package that we thought we could work from at this race and, go out there and hope we could run a new PB. Coming off of World Cup Finals last year, we haven't really done anything with George's car since. We had tossed around making some pretty big changes to it, but anytime we kind of thought we found a direction, we couldn't fully commit to it. So we knew we were getting close to crunch time for the race this year. We just decided to put the car back how it was. We knew we could make some decent passes with it as it hasn't been running in the current rear-wheel drive configuration. So we basically just did a quick overview on that car, buttoned it back up, and loaded it on the trailer. So last year with Clay's car, we actually had a ton of success. He was #1 qualifier, I think, at every event we entered the car at, had a couple different wins at different races. So we had stepped the car back to a 58mm turbo setup, still a dry sump, still our engine, but basically brought the power down to a level where, it's not running at the absolute peak of what the car can do, like we've kind of experienced with Christine's and Stacy's cars in the past. So coming into this event, we noticed that the rules allowed us to switch to methanol fuel, and we were also still on an air-to-air with that car. So we went ahead and ordered up water-to-air from ETS that we kind of built to suit the car, and we also switched the car over to M5 from ethanol, which had previously been running. We weren't super sure how much power it was going to pick up in the M5, but we knew it was going to be good. So we got the car in the dyno. I think the day or the 2 days before the trailer showed up because we had some issues we had to work through, and the car put out 1,687 horsepower on a pair of 58s. And we about lost it in the back shop when we saw that dyno number come up. Stacy Burnett is one of our most popular racers, as he's been all over the internet with different street racing videos he's done and the Hoonigan videos that he's now blown up for. That car, we ran it again 68mm stuff earlier this year. We decided to make the switch to a 72mm setup, kind of for the same reasons we did on Christine's, just, having too many issues, and, we have to have a car that can go out there and make rounds. So with a pair of 72s on there, the car makes a little over 2,200 on M1 methanol. Going into this race, we could actually run the car in M5. So we didn't even put the car on the dyno, we just switched it to M5 at the race. So it should be making, somewhere around 2,300, 2,400 horsepower, which we knew would at least be competitive in the class. At World Cup finals, we're never really coming here anticipating taking home like first and second place trophies, just because we're really not in a good position to be racing on a pro tree with the GTR transmissions. So that's why you see at a lot of the races we compete at, everything's on a sportsman tree. At World Cup finals, everything's pro tree, which is how all the big leagues are. So it's not really a problem. But we come in really trying to maybe just qualify, go a couple rounds, and set some new personal bests for everybody. Knowing that George and Christine hadn't really had any seat time in the cars since Texas 2K earlier this year, we decided to go ahead and show up on the early testing day on Wednesday. So we got all three cars out there, and obviously hopes are high. Christine goes down first pass, and boom, driveline issue. So we're like, oh, all right, well, that's not the ideal pass, but here's George, let's get him up there. George lines it up, does a cool burnout, makes the pass, boom, another driveline issue. This is how our day's gonna go. So we had one car left to run. We put the chassis car out there. It wasn't terrible. We shook the tire. Again, this is a package that's not very sorted for us. Made our way back to the pits to find out that we had to pull the transmissions out of both cars. So that was not a great way to end our early testing day. It wasn't anything, a weird part failure or something anybody had done wrong. We have a lot of runtime on these transmissions, and it was just some older parts that, finally gave up. So we had to pull both the transmissions out and see what we could do to get both of them running by the next day. Thursday is the first day of qualifying World Cup finals. We went ahead and got there early so we could kind of fully assess the damage between the two transmissions on George and Christine's cars. So what ended up happening is Christine's actually broke an older clutch basket that we had, and George's had actually snapped the input shaft. Between the two cars, we've got a full backup transmission, so the decision was made to go ahead and put the backup trans in Christine's car, pull the transaxle out of Christine's, and put George's clutch in that trans. So between those two, the backup trans and those two transmissions we used to make one, we were actually able to make qualifying with both George's and Christine's cars. With us having 5 full rounds of qualifying in World Cup finals, there's not really any need for us to swing for the fences on the very first pass. So we got the cars up there. Christine, Stacy, and Clay all made, pretty relatively soft passes, but went down nice and smooth. So we at least knew we had some healthy cars as we were going to progress in the later days. We got the chassis car up there after shaking the tire on the testing day. It made a really decent lift for us, basically having no data on this setup. It clicked off a 701. So, almost going 6s on it, on a brand new setup again. We were, pretty happy with that and had our high hopes for the rest of the weekend on that car. Coming into Friday, which is the second day of qualifying, we knew we had some work to do on George's car, but everything else appeared to be healthy. We get to the track and the chassis car is just not acting right. We ended up having to look at the TH400, which nobody expected to have happen. But we ended up having to look at that, and there were some internal issues that we damaged on the 701 pass. We tried everything we could to get spare parts there or try and work with what we had at the track, but we had to retire the car actually on the second day. So with Stacy's car making a half-decent pass in the first day qualifying, we decided to turn the car up. The car left really, really well. It was moving through the 330 to 8th. It looked like a very, very low 7-second pass. I don't ever want to say it looked like a 6-second pass, but the hope is always there for it. And then at about the 1,000-foot mark, you see the death plume, blow out of the hood. So we had an engine failure on that car. Obviously, we're not putting a new engine in one of these at the track. So, it was really, really not fun to see. The car clicked off at 720, but we had to retire for the weekend after that pass. With as much power as Clay's car picked up on the dyno, and that car being as reliable as it's been, we knew that if that thing held together, it was going to go fast. So he pulled up for his first qualifier on day 2, and it left really soft, but as it got down the track, it really picked up some steam. It clicked off like 184 miles an hour. And we're like, what's going on with this? Like, the car traps that high, it should be a mid 7-second pass for sure. Tony got to dig into the data, and we basically had no forward drive. Again, this is a transmission that's been in this car for a long time. It's got a ton of drag passes on it, and we just simply kind of reached the limit of what the forward clutch is able to deliver. So, kind of our theme for the weekend, the decision was made to pull the transmission out of that, pull the forward clutch assembly out of one of George's transmissions, and get that car ready for qualifying again the next day. With all the carnage we'd already seen today, it was very, very refreshing to have Christine go down the track, set a new personal best, and at least let us go to the hotel that night, just not completely feeling sorry for ourselves. So she had a great launch. The car went faster than it's ever been. It went 205 miles an hour and clicked off at 710. So that was an amazing qualifying pass, and right on the edge of going 6s, which is obviously what we're always trying to go for in these big power cars. So for the third transmission that we had run in Night Fury for the weekend, we pulled up to make a qualifying pass. The car left pretty decently. It was a high 120, which isn't the best. The car's 60 foot, but definitely not as terrible as it could have gone. So we made it down the track, first, second, third gear, car was moving, and then we heard it land the limiter in fourth. This has kind of been an ongoing issue that we've had using these stock synchros and these transmissions. Where sometimes they don't really like to shift under a whole lot of power on the 3.4 or the 4.5. Again, we're using stock synchros in these GR6s, so we can't be too awful mad about it. But it was definitely something that we knew, even if the car makes a decent pass up to that point, it could happen at any point during the weekend. We show up for Saturday, last day of qualifying. By this point, the stands are completely full, so everybody's got their game face on. We're all wanting to show out. We're still riding high from Christine's 710 pass. She goes up, runs a 702 at 208 miles an hour, and we about lost it. Like, that car going almost a 6 with 2 full passes on it was just incredible. She ends up being the number 2 qualifier in Street Fighter, and again, we were just beyond ecstatic. It was amazing. So we got the forward clutch from George's backup trans, put in Clay's car, took that car up, and Clay did exactly what we hoped he was going to do. So, we didn't have this super soft launch. The car just left hard as could be, clicks off a 755 on its first pass today at 184 miles an hour, and we couldn't make it back to the pits fast enough to just pick that dude up and just throw sodas on his head or whatever you wanted to do. Like, we were so happy for that guy. He went up again later in the day for the second round of qualifying and clicked off a 756. So we're like, yes, this car's working. It was great after having kind of, a soft first qualifier and then the forward clutch failure. So we were sitting pretty at number 8 in Wild Street, and we were up again, ecstatic feeling. So we pulled George's Night Fury up again, just hoping and praying that the transmission would actually shift. It's basically just a mirror image of the pass before. Decent launch, going through the gears, and just won't shift again. There's no point, us just continuing to send the car down the track with it not performing. So we just decided to, call it quits on that car for the weekend, try and figure out some solutions moving forward, and just kind of concentrate on both Christine and Clay moving forward. So we're pulling into the track Sunday morning. Again, the getting into the track's just an absolute mess because there's so many people there to watch this amazing race. We make our way to the pits, still feeling pretty good about Clay and Christine's qualifying. We're warming the cars up. We go to start Christine's car, and there's just nothing. We parked the car the night before. It just made a great pass. Why is the car not starting? So a bunch of diagnosing, and somehow the car is now out of time, or it appears it's out of time, even though we drove the car back to the pits. We're freaking out because we got to be up for eliminations here shortly. Come to find out, we had a weird issue with one of the variable cam gears just locked in the wrong position. So the guys were scrambling, pulling the covers off timing covers off the front cover. We get the VTC unlocked, put it all back together, and boom, the car fires up. So it's like, can we catch a break this weekend? But we got the car ready, so we got Clay's fired up, got hers ready to race, and we pulled them up for eliminations round 1. anybody familiar with this race knows that you could qualify number one, and it's not going to be an easy race first round. So, we gave Christine a little pep talk. She's going to be racing a pretty tough turbo auto Mustang. We pull in her lanes. She does exactly what she needs to. Clicks off a 740, 211, which is a crazy high mile an hour, by far her fastest. We knew we had another tough race coming the next round, but again, we were moving on. Clay didn't end up qualifying quite as well as Christine in the number 8 spot, so he was going to definitely have a pretty tough race first round. He goes out there, again clicks off a 756, a little bit higher mile an hour, but got the W, and we knew we were going on to round 2 with both cars. So we get Christine's car back to the pits after round 1, shut the car off to let it cool down, and we kind of have an inclination like, hey, let's just make sure this thing's going to fire up after we had that timing issue before. Luckily we did, because it did have the exact same issue. So the guys had to pull the VTC covers back off again to make sure we can make it to round 2. And we're scared to death. We're trying to think if we need to leave the car running once we pull it up. So it's just high anxiety. We get the car up. Luckily, the guy red lit racing Christine and allowed us to run into the semifinals, which is by far the furthest she's made it. Unfortunately, on her pass, she broke a turbo. We had an issue where the engine was held at a high RPM for like 4 or 5 seconds at 70 PSI boost, so we can't really be mad at the turbo. But yeah, we had to park the car after she made it to semifinals, unfortunately. So we get Clay's car up there for round 2, and the car's acting really weird. It wouldn't do a burnout. We couldn't, there's no warning lights on the dash. Just something isn't right. They're waving him up to come up to the line. He gets the car up there, cold slicks. I was like, this isn't gonna be good. So he pulls it up, and the car just won't even go into launch control. There's no chance that Clay's gonna win this round with a GTR that won't launch if the guy just doesn't red light. Obviously the guy doesn't red light, but Clay got put on the trailer for an issue that was no fault of his own, unfortunately. So you never know how these weekends are going to go. I think we're one of the few shops out there, if not the only one, that's bringing 5 full cars to World Cup finals. None of that would be possible without A, the perfect customer base, and B, a shop full of just absolute beast. We had Tony there tuning everything. Kevin's there running around, probably put 50 miles on his little legs, doing all the photos, all the video. We've got Sam, Brandon, Terrence, Knox, Wade, just for 5 full days of racing, just pulling transmissions out of cars, making sure the cars are ready for the rounds. Just, it's full 12-hour days of just absolute busting ass. We couldn't be more proud of what these guys were able to accomplish. Again, nobody's bringing 5 cars out there, especially at this level, at this kind of race, and making them go down the track. This is, as we've said, our favorite race of the year, bar none. Jason Miller, Chris Miller, they put on, in my opinion, the best drag racing event you can possibly go to. It's unreal. If you haven't been to one of these, you definitely need to try and make it out. I promise if you swing by the pits, you're going to meet our customers, which you're going to think are, family friends you've had for a long time. The guys in the shop are the same way. We had a ton of people come by the tent this year, and just want to say thank you very much. As 2022 is wrapping up, we've got a pretty packed race schedule for the first part of next year. As usual, we'll be supporting the DCT World Cup with probably 8 or 9 cars this year between the R8s, Huracans, the GTRs, and then we'll be going on the Texas 2K to hopefully take back our roll racing championship and do well in the drag racing as well.